you can't afford to have an off day. A lot of people think that physical fitness is great to just stay young. You got to fix your gut. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, I said I want to fix my mind.
Embrace the discomfort by forcing discomfort onto yourself.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Beyond Seven Figures podcast. My guest today has changed my life in a multitude of different ways. Those of you who've been around following me for a long time, you would have seen it. The Charlie you know when you first started following me, not only am I different in terms of overall energy and clarity of thinking, I'm a big fan of results, as you can see from my t-shirt. For those who are watching on YouTube, big fan of results. It's one thing for me to tell you. It's another thing to just show you. Just go to some of my old videos, look at some of my old photos, and what you're going to find is that I look completely different. My face has less inflammation. The coloring of my skin is completely different. Well, color of my hair is different too, but that's a different question, right? But the color of my skin is different physically and muscularly. You'll notice that, that's different. My fitness level is different. And all of that is attributed to the man here, Regan Archibald. And, I want to introduce him to you, not only as a dear friend, we've known each other for a long time, but when somebody impacts your life so transformationally as Regan has, it's a story that I feel like I need to stand on the tallest mountains and I need to be able to shout and tell the world, look at what's happened. Because you could just, again, I can show you my blood work and the transformations, but just look at my photos. You're going to see what happened. And all of that is, it's due to this dude. So Regan, hey, welcome to the show, man.
Well, I appreciate that. It was such a generous opening, and it's always been an honor to work with you. And for those of you who've had the chance to work with Charlie, you know how much energy that he puts out. And so, my job is well, Charlie's my coach too. And so I'm like, I want to make sure he's the healthiest version of himself so that I can get good advice. So it was a slightly selfish endeavor anyway.
But it's actually really cool how organically that has just kind of worked out, where we do, help one another out. And then through that, we become such close friends that, it's really a very personal endeavor because, not only do we want to help each other out from a professional level, but, personally, you're one of my closest friends. And I'm not afraid to admit that. And, and we're going to talk about one of the cool things that we've got coming up here, that we've done together. But one thing I want to bring up, and the reason why I think this is also important, did you see the article that Jamie Dimon put out recently about health? Jamie Dimon, I think he's the CEO of JP Morgan. And, he was being interviewed and they said, so what do you think about, physical fitness and what role does that play in an executive's health? Now, I'm going to paraphrase a little bit. But he said, look, physical fitness at the end of the day is incredibly important because one thing you have to understand about an executive is that executive needs to be able to get up in the morning and needs to be able to think clearly and needs to be able to sustain their energy throughout the day. And when you're managing, in his case, billions of dollars, but for many of us, it's, thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, you can't afford to have an off day. You can't afford to wake up in the morning and have brain fog. You can't afford to, be 2:00 in the afternoon and run so low on energy that you just can't keep going. And so, a lot of people think that, physical fitness is great to just stay young and maintain that longevity. But, health, actually, it's like Tony Robbins told me, how you do anything is how you do everything. And that's what brought you and I together, not just, physically, I wanted to transform and be better. Of course, I thought I looked better than I actually did until I looked at the comparison photos. But really, it was about, hey, Regan, what can I do to optimize my brain, right?
What you specifically asked for is, I want to be superhuman.
Yeah, I want to be superhuman. Yeah.
I said, guaranteed or your money back. Then I just gave you the title of superhuman right there. And then we started working together.
Exactly. But it's cool. And I'm going to get to people like the big superhuman formula that we created, but I would be doing everybody a disservice if I just let them believe that if you just if you dive into this formula that your world is going to change, that it's a, it's an easy button and a quick fix because, you know, look, we're in the business of telling the truth, and you are, and I am in the business of telling the truth. And so, sometimes the truth means that, there's going to be but it's a hard truth. When I say I want to be superhuman, and I said, what do we have to do? The first thing that you said to me is, we got to fix your gut. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, I said, I want to fix my mind. Like, why are we fixing my gut? So why don't you talk a little bit about like that gut response and why you decided to start there as opposed to just put me on a whole bunch of nootropics?
It's a good question because I'm trained in functional medicine. And so, what my job is to do is identify the cause of the cause. And where most people go wrong is they follow some Instagram influencer, or they read an article, or they think mistakenly that there's just like one supplement that's going to change everything. But if you don't go to the root cause, and not everybody, some people, their gut's fairly healthy. And so it's not where we start with everybody, but with you, we saw very specific markers in your blood labs that said, okay, there's some inflammation in your gut. You've got intestinal permeability. There's probably some infections. Let's run a stool test. And then sure enough, we found there's just a mountain of what's called dysbiosis going on. And the bacteria in the gut are creating all the precursors for the neurotransmitter in the brain. And so we used to have this funny saying at East West. He said, well, just because you may have shit for brains, it's not that big of a deal because the biome, the bacteria in your gut weighs approximately the same as your brain. And so
That's funny.
yeah, so don't be offended if anyone's ever called you shit for brains, because you're like, thank you. I've got really good neurotransmitter production from all of my bacteria. And that literally, that phrase is, it's like so close to the truth. It's comical now that we realize how the brain actually works. And so you've got more nerve endings in your gut than you've got in your entire spinal cord. Your spinal column, you think, oh, there's so many nerve endings because that's what all the organs are fed by. But actually your gut has more than that, to a magnitude of about 3 times more. So if you fix the gut, a lot of times the brain starts catching up and the brain starts feeling better and better. And we still have even access to all the cool pathways in the brain.
Where do you think the saying trust your gut actually came from? What do you think that has any connection with the gut's connection to the brain when they're like, what does your
Totally.
gut tell you?
Yeah. Because that's how we check in. Like, we're all human beings, and being a human being means your body is an intelligent factory. It's not just your brain. I mean, where is your mind, by the way? It's non-local, right? And so if you access intelligence in your body, a lot of us, that intelligence center is in your gut, it's in your heart. There's a nerve called the vagus nerve, and that means the wandering nerve. But the vagus nerve, and if you have really healthy, what's called vagal tone, then you're more connected to your gut and you'll make far better decisions that way.
Mm, got it. Now, we worked on a few different things. We worked on my sleep. Actually, it was interesting because Ben Greenfield was on a podcast just earlier with me, and we were talking about sleep and whatnot. I know he's also a good friend of yours. So we talked about sleep. You're talking about gut, and we did a lot of different things and we also optimized the mind. And so this was like almost an 18-month. What started as a pet project turned into something pretty substantial. So why don't we go into like that? I remember you took it on as a personal mission to say, I'm going to formulate something that's going to knock this guy's, I'm going to make him superhuman. So let's dive into that process and why you chose certain things. Because a lot of people, when they think about like, all right, I'm going to optimize a brain, they go for caffeine, or they'll do this off the shelf type of nootropic or Adderall, which, I find to be personally very dangerous. And, I hated that experience massively. And entrepreneurs were grasping for straws. We're trying to find something. So we found something.
Well, I think that was the thing is, once we started peeling back the layers, we got you on like BPC, thymosin beta 4. We started working on the recovery side of the gut. We started calming down the inflammatory pathways. I don't know if you remember, but SBI Protect, it has lactoferrins in it. It's actually from serum of young calves. Kind of an interesting place to get those.
Those are pills, right?
Those are pills.
'Cause
Yeah.
I think you actually sent me another bottle of that recently just to kind of, redo it. Because I believe I'm on that right
Yep.
now. Still, I think.
Totally. Yeah. And you'll see it in your cycles. We do off and on. You don't want to push the same pathway with peptides or anything else for too long because we want to train your body to heal itself. But then we started working on the growth hormone pathways. You're recovering better. That also helped with deep sleep. And then using the nasal sprays like Selenk to calm down some of the anxiety, kind of that drive that you've got. And, we had you to a certain level and we were using Cellcore. If you remember all the detoxification, we were using binders because of when you're removing parasites and infections in the body, you've got to release the heavy metals at the same time. A lot of doctors miss that. And so we had Charlie on a heavy detox protocol for 4 months. And then we said, let's go a little deeper. And that's where I said, hey, I don't know if you're open to this, but here's what I like using for creativity, for focus. And that's where we introduce like Kratom, Kava Kava, lion's mane, L-theanine. And then you were like, all right, I love this. What is this? And I was like, well, yeah, we've been using it for about a decade. And here's what we use it for: pain and all kinds of things. But it's really a great integration because you've got little stimulating factors of kratom, which helps you stay focused without, if you do too much, it's a sedative. So we made sure we dosed it appropriate. And then the kava kava helps activate GABA. So you're more creative and you feel relaxed. So it's like a relaxed focus. The lion's mane, I put it in there just for neuroprotection because I know you're always going to push yourself a little harder than what your brain wants you to. And so I
No,
wanted to make,
me?
I
No.
mean, yeah, if you don't know Charlie, he's not competitive at all. He doesn't care if he wins or loses. It's all about the journey.
You can find me meditating under a palm tree, right?
As long as the results are happening. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and then the L-theanine was just so that we had this nice calibration of brainwaves so that you could access both hemispheres of the brain on call and be incredibly focused, creative, but also have protection for the brain. And that seems to be where the superhuman came out. Charlie, we gave him a cape, and so now he's official.
Well, the interesting thing is, so as we were doing this too, like there was a point in time when you said to me, we're just not going to be able to produce the results that we want. And, I think this is going to be about, good enough. And, because it's just, we're missing this, is still missing the mark. And, it was really good, better than almost, anything, but there were components of this, right? And it was, so you can take all of the supplements that you mentioned or herbs or whatever you want to call it that you mentioned. You could do it individually, but most kratom is just really crappy quality, and that stuff gets really dangerous. Like you can, depending on what state you live in, there's opportunities for you to buy it on like you vape shops or gas stations and whatnot. Like stay away from that stuff. It is dangerous, dangerous, dangerous. Not everything is the same. There can be heavy metals, it could be toxins, it could be like fecal matter and stuff. Like those have other properties in it that can be like cause a lot of problems. I can't emphasize that enough. And then then there's kava, and the kava, there's different grades and different types of kava. Then the L-theanine and the lion's mane, like, I mean, we're taking different supplements, but there's like a certain amount of like there's the right dosage, and then there's the right process that they have to go through and the combination. So what we ended up doing is we found this process, and now it's a patented process for the way we're able to extract the kratom. So, it goes through this nano-ice process to make it incredibly bioavailable. Then the kava is then, between it, the way it's filtered and processed and whatnot, it has to hit like the right way. And then, of course, you just microdose the kratom as opposed to, making sure you went real heavy, because we're not looking to get high, we're looking for one specific outcome. And then the lion's mane and so forth. And so then we came up ultimately with this right here,
Founders Fuel.
right? Founders Fuel.
There it is.
Yeah. That's what happened. So interestingly enough, so we came up with Founders Fuel here. And then after I had it, I'm like, damn, this is really good. When I find something really cool, I like to share it. And so shared it with a few other folks, and they go, oh my God, dude, I don't know what's in this, but I've never been more productive before in my life. One of the guys, actually, Duran, who's now a team member, Duran was like, for a long time, I was losing that motivation to go in the office and just get things done. I was just dragging. because he was overworked doing a lot of stuff. And he's like, once gave me some of this founder's fuel, I've never wanted to work so bad before in my life. And, because for, I don't know what it is, but it does help to create this drive. And, interestingly, as we went through this, I was like, Reagan, I think we might have business here. And I think when we were talking about it, we were actually in West Palm Beach together having lunch. I think that's when we were really like, I think we need to go all in. You,
Yeah.
me, Cade, if I remember right. I think that's when we decided we were going to
Yep.
go.
That was it.
And then we started introducing it to other people, and every person that we needed to bring on the team. And we said, before you get involved, we just want you to try it. We knew we were onto something because every single one, 100% of everybody said, you know what? You don't have to pay me. I would rather do this for equity. And we're like, damn. When have you ever been in a business before where people were like, no, don't pay me. Can I get this for equity instead? Right. And that just goes to show that the impact of the stuff that we did. Just the few people that we introduced in the beta launch, like all of them have all said, this has been such a life transformational experience. And there's other products out there where you might find like there's a fairly large company, they do coffee and kratom. Doesn't hit the same way because the reason why we didn't like it is it was this major crash at the end. And there's some other reasons, goes more to like your background, the scientific stuff. I mean, I'm a coach, I'm a consultant. I know what it feels like, but it from the health standpoint, like what it does. And the reason why, you had some reservations and knew we could do better. What is the core difference between, say, like this product? Obviously the manufacturing, like nobody can do it. Nobody can reproduce what we have. Like aside from that part, and just what's a big difference between this and some of the more popular ones without actually mentioning their names?
Well, the biggest thing, so if you look at what Kratom does and the pathways it works on, it does seem to release endorphins. So it works on the opiate growth factors of the brain. And so anytime you work on the opiate growth factors, you're going to get a little bit of endorphin release. And that's where people love pain pills sometimes. So the problem is, if you stimulate it a little bit, it's like it activates the pleasure center in your brain. And that's one of the reasons we love being entrepreneurs, is because it's not necessarily like, oh, we hit the goal and now we feel really good. It's like, okay, what's the next thing we can accomplish that's even bigger than the last thing? And when people get burned out, that pathway gets blocked. And so we block the ability to make endorphins in the brain. And so one of the treatments that we've used for our patients with chronic illness or autoimmunity, specifically like Hashimoto's, is we've used a substance called low-dose naltrexone. So if somebody has like an opiate overdose, like they were clean and then they went back to the same dose of heroin, we'll say, that's where you see like people having bumper stickers like, I carry LDN with me, or I carry naltrexone. Naltrexone's a bigger dose to help pull somebody out of that phase, but we've used low-dose naltrexone because it re-engages those same endorphins in the brain in a very safe way, and it's non-habit forming. Kratom does some of the same thing as low-dose naltrexone because it downregulates inflammation in your body. So you feel better, you feel lighter. And it also allows you to have a better brain-body connection because of the vagal tone that it can supply. So vagal tone, we talked about that nerve earlier. It just connects the neurotransmitters in your gut to the neural pathways in your brain. You get better what's called neuromuscular adaptation. So you feel like you can push through movements better in the gym. So even if you use this, like if you're on a hike or if you're a mountain biker or skier, you're going to notice that you get in flow state much easier. And when you can activate that pleasure center in the brain just enough, it pulls you out of that mode of feeling burned out or lack of motivation. Even though you want to accomplish your goals and you're excited about your future, you've just over-exhausted that pathway based on behaviors of entrepreneurs. And so what I found is if I can just stimulate it just a little bit with a natural agent, then the brain starts to respond really well. And I know that wasn't your question, but I wanted to create some context around why it's important. And it's been used for thousands of years. They still, it's used primarily, it grows in Southeast Asia on trees, and it's the leaves of these trees that have these alkaloids in it. And it's the alkaloids that when your liver metabolizes those, you get that nice little, almost like a feeling of euphoria. It just feels like your body feels warm and relaxed again. And you'll know you've overdone it if you feel tired. And most companies, we'll talk about dosing first because the danger is in the dosing. You can drink too much water and kill yourself faster than you can from being dehydrated. You just start chugging gallons of water and you'll upset your electrolyte balance so fast that your heart goes into AFib and you can have a stroke. Long distance runners, that's why electrolytes are so important. That's why very first thing I do with my clients, I send them electrolytes, which you probably remember. And I'm like, yeah, you got to get the hydration right. But with that said, with Kratom or with any substance, the dosing is the real important thing. Now, a lot of companies out there, for some reason, in my opinion, because we've used this, clinically for over a decade, and we've always used kratom that's very well sourced and it's fermented. It's got to have a little fermentation in it because it breaks down the proteins. Even if it's high quality, if you dose it too high, then you're going to overexpress those pathways in the brain, and then people are going to crave it and they're going to want it. And that's why you find it in vape shops and everywhere else where there's very addictive chemicals in those places. The other problem is when there's heavy metals, you're putting there's arsenic and there's lead and even some mercury in certain supplies. Cadmium is another heavy metal that they found in lots of these kratom sources. And you even mentioned like the fecal matter, which is not uncommon because if you find cheap kratom and it's very easy to purchase, it probably has not been filtered. It's not ran through a GMP facility. And that's one of the criteria I had. If we're going to do this, I want to do it the right way because I had my own source, but they just do powders and it's a very high quality. I said, we need to have the same standards that I have in the clinic. And that's where it took us over a year to get everything, to pass the sniff test. But now we have it all processed through a GMP facility. So that means there's third-party testing. We have the documents that show that there's no contaminants. We also have documentation of the correct dosing because a lot of companies are dosing at very high levels because they do want repeat business. And this is why a lot of states are cracking down. They're like, hey, we don't want this in our state because there's some bad players out there that are creating dependency on it. Now, it's very hard, but I have had patients who are, they're using the equivalent of about 100 times the dose in Founder's Fuel. And when I looked at their labs, their kidneys are failing. They've got fatty liver disease, even though they're skinny. Their brain is just like wired. And so I said, I don't even want to put anyone at risk. And that's where we have the L-theanine and the lion's mane in there, which we can get to. But the real risk that people have is having that dependency. And then we're just trying to reactivate that pleasure center in the brain. If you read the book, The Balanced Brain by Christina Nord, she's a neuroscientist, and just read the first 2 chapters and you'll understand exactly what I'm talking about as far as this pleasure pathway goes. It's not the pleasure itself, it's enjoying the process as you go through it, as you're reaching your bigger goals. And that's what was missing in all the products that we looked at. I mean, you and I have sampled dozens of products and then way too much and looked under the hood at all these companies, and we're able to find like the major manufacturers. And we said, we're going to do it differently and bypass all of that and create a product that doesn't exist. So this is like, you won't be able to repeat what we've created here from what I can tell. And I hope more companies actually start following suit and do things, what I think is the right way, where we don't want you dependent on it. We want you taking weekends off. We want you to use this as a medicine that is going to be good for you and allow you to do the work that you want to do in the most creative aspect possible. Our goal is to make you superhuman, which you already are, but we don't want to forget the fact that every feedback system, every system in your biology, there's inputs, but if you apply too many inputs like water, too much water, the output is going to be devastating. And so we've dosed it properly. We've got the kava kava that's, kava kava, if you don't source it from the right place, the minerals in the soil actually change what are called kavatones. So the kavatones are what activate GABA. And so you drink some kava and you just feel like almost like worse, like you need to, like you feel almost anxious. And a lot of times it's because the kavatones, they didn't have the right minerals in the soil. And that's where, I did my medical training in Hawaii. And, when we do herb walks, we would go and we would harvest kava from the right sources where you've got the volcanic ash this high density in minerals. And so then the way that the kava tones are processed, if you do an alcohol-based processing, you're stripping out a lot of those minerals. And so we wanted to keep it very pure. The water-based processing makes a huge difference as far as the amount of GABA you get. And GABA is that neurotransmitter that's really important for you to feel connected. So we want you to feel connected to your work, connected to your team, connected to your life. And we have these rituals historically, like in Polynesian cultures, you can go to kava bars and they're sipping kava. They've been doing this for thousands of years. Now kava bars are in Florida. We don't really have them in Utah yet, but hopefully we'll get some. But it's a really nice ritual. So much better for you than alcohol, because alcohol, that little sip of alcohol, you get a little GABA, but it's short-lived and then you're chasing it the rest of the night. Whereas founders feel you just have this nice little influx of GABA that helps you feel like everything's going to be okay.
Yeah, you're right. And the interesting thing about the way that we did this is, again, it was produced for me, right? And so this wasn't one of those things where we said, let's create Founders Fuel and let's turn this into $100 million business. If we decided that that's what we were going to do, we probably would have made some different decisions if that was
What do you mean? We're doing great financially.
Well, and I say that because it's like, if anybody else who turned around and looked at us and they would say, you guys are crazy because it's all produced in the United States and we could produce this a heck of a lot cheaper if we went to China, but we wanted it produced in the United States so that we can be very close to understanding the production and, really trust what's going in it and so forth. We had certain standards for the manufacturing company. So we selected standards for the supplies that all went in. And to the point where every one of these ingredients are so expensive and the manufacturing process is so expensive. And our margins are, from the best research I could find, are significantly lower than industry standard, even though our price point is higher than most. I think we might even be the most expensive competitor in the market. I think actually by a decent margin, with margins lower than everybody else. But at the end of the day, it's like, if you're an executive or you're a CEO, like, then these are the people that actually, they understand quality and they're going to be looking for the best. This probably isn't going to be for a college student, who's just, looking for, they're the ones who are drinking light, it's probably not the right thing, because it has to be, this is for somebody who's like, they're already successful in their own right. Maybe they're looking for just a little bit more of an edge. I mean, worst comes to worst, we end up with thousands of bottles for our own use, and, it is what it is, and so be it. And that's fine. That's still a win for us because this is phenomenal. But, because we're doing this, like, this isn't our primary business. I mean, Regan's got East West. I have predictable profits. Those are our primary businesses. So we're not going to sit here and we're going to try to push something on people for the sake of trying to sell units. You heard Regan earlier. He said, take the weekends off. We don't want you taking this every day. We don't want you to consume, a whole bunch. I believe we say recommended is, basically no more than one bottle a day, right? So it's like, maybe half around 10 a.m., half around maybe 2 p.m., thereabouts.
Then you're done.
And then you're done. And it's like, you could talk to some other people. They're going to try to push a heck of a lot more because they want to sell more units. They have board members to respond to and everything else. But again, it's like, look, we're just here to help. And, I started this podcast specifically to talk about, like, this is an edge, but it's not the magic pill. And I don't want you thinking like this is the magic pill. Like, this is an enormous edge. Like, it's the most powerful thing I've ever had before in my life. But at the same time, if I didn't sleep well, if I didn't take care of my nutrition, if I didn't exercise, if I didn't get some sunlight, if I wasn't eating a healthy lifestyle, I don't think it'd have the same impact. So it's like, how you do anything is how you do everything. And so, when you talk to Regan and I, like, we're going to shoot straight with you. And look, if you have had some sort of issues with addictions or anything else for that matter, it's probably not the right thing for you to do. I mean, it's like caffeine, anything can be addictive. There might be another solution for you. This stuff is incredible. It's really incredible.
It is really good. And here's the thing is, get some medical advice, run some tests and see how it does. But really, it's experiential. Here's what makes it work better. If you exercise hard in the morning, you're going to activate those endorphin pathways already. So you're stimulating your opiate growth factors with your exercise. And I can tell you, if you don't exercise and you use this, you don't feel the same benefits. If you use this before you exercise, you'll notice that you've got more endurance mentally and physically. But you'll also notice that you don't quite get that same kind of warm feeling in your body. You don't get the same euphoria because you're almost saturating it. It's being used up quicker because your endorphins are so activated from exercise. So you're metabolizing it quicker. If you use it with caffeine, if you like coffee, the L-theanine in there, I know a lot of I'm a big fan of coffee, like 1 cup a day. And if you combine the founder's fuel with your cup of coffee, you'll just notice that the caffeine works that much better. You get better dopamine, you feel cleaner on the caffeine, you don't have that jitteriness, you don't get the drop off because the adenosine receptors, because caffeine's a stimulant, right? Okay, so you push on the gas, our body has to push on the brakes, and that's what's called adenosine. But L-theanine turns off that adenosine response, but it also prevents your body from being too stimulated from the caffeine. And Kratom's actually, it's been shown to work even better. It gets activated by a little bit of caffeine. So if you guys really want to find that sweet spot, use your body as an experiment. But those are a couple tips that always help you. If you don't exercise, you're not going to feel it as much. So this is my little plug to get people exercising all the time, but it actually is the truth. And you can test my hypothesis. And then if you use a little bit of caffeine with it, you'll notice just a little better mental clarity. It'll give you a little edge. If you do have liver issues, kidney issues, I would make sure that you don't do more than a half a bottle a day and then run your labs before and after. We've actually haven't seen any damage to it. But once again, we're not giving medical advice here, but you do want to be smart with anything you use. Even if this was, if we're talking about vitamin C, I'd still say the same thing.
Yeah. I talk to your doctor. If you got any issues, talk to your doctor
Talk
first.
to your doctor. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, for sure. I think the point of the matter is like, this is arguably the most powerful thing that I've ever had when it comes to like creating this in an edge. Like somebody asked me in one word, how would you describe it? And I'm like, limitless. I really do feel like, that movie Limitless, all of a sudden it was like, boom. And I'm like, I really feel that way. And it's funny because there's so many people that have said the same thing to me. That like, God, it just opened up a whole different world for me that I didn't realize it existed. And I feel like it's limitless, which is phenomenal. But anything this powerful, it requires responsibility. And I think maybe we could have, started with that. And that's the most important message that I think I want to make sure that we get across is anything this powerful requires a degree of responsibility, which means that, take care of your body, follow the dosage recommendations, don't overdo it. Take the weekends off, right?
Yep.
But you follow the protocol like we're talking about right now. Whew, like this is pretty freaking cool.
Yeah, feels good. Yeah, and that's the thing. So, the other thing, making sure you got your right nutrition in, make sure you're detoxing, make sure you're doing the things that you need to do for your body. You'll love it. I like using it for projects that require a lot of focus and complex analytical skills. So, if I'm reviewing a bunch of labs, I love having the creative aspect where I can pull in, different insights and resources. I like it when I teach because it relaxes me more. I'm able to connect with the audience. I do like it sometimes when I mountain bike, but I like it more after I do heavy workouts because I find that it gets metabolized so quickly. Whereas I can do a half a bottle. I'm a lightweight, so I can do a half a bottle and I can feel really relaxed for like 6 hours. I mean, it's crazy. And there's no drop off either. I don't miss it when it's gone. It's not going to overwhelm your nervous system.
I think that's it. Several people have asked me like, well, what happens on the weekends when you don't take it? I'm like, well, nothing, but I'm about to go into a 3-hour focus block.
And, there you go.
That's when, for me, like, that's when it's because it's already, I'm going to be in the zone. And then when I take Founder's Fuel, then I'm like, I am really in the zone. But it's funny. I never thought about taking this before working out. But I gave this to a gentleman, was it 2 days ago? And he decided he would take it before he worked out. And he said to me, Charlie, my man, like, woo, this is better than any pre-workout I ever had. I go, what do you mean? And he goes, no, it didn't give me like the jitters and everything, but I went to the gym on a mission and I just like, boom, I got it done. And I was like, yeah, that's awesome. I actually never would have thought about it with that use, so it'll be interesting as people use this. they find different use cases, share that with us, because it's interesting to see how different people are using it.
It's everything in your biology. You want to look at your body as your own science experiment. And so you'll find out what works best for you. But I enjoy it when it actually makes work more fun for me.
Yeah. I'm just curious, like if people actually want to reach out to you, if they want to maybe get blood work done to kind of see, what's going on in their own bodies and everything else, like where would they go to make that happen?
Yeah, well, they can just go to agelessfuture.com and we've got a link right there. You can just click on schedule a health span assessment and let us know you're from Founders Fuel. And then we'll help you out with some labs. We've got a nice discount for you guys.
Awesome. And then that would be agelessfuture.com. And I'll tell you, when I got my blood work done over I used LabCorp, when you send that. And I mean, you have me get my blood work done every 2 to 3 months, to kind of stay on top of things. But the woman at LabCorp, she tells me every time, she's like, nobody ever asks for all of this stuff to get done. Like nobody ever does. They usually, when you go to the doctor, that's a very basic panel.
Yeah, a couple vials of blood is all. We pull out about 12.
Yeah, you pull out a lot. And not only that, it's like the vials of blood, then the urine, and then, depending, should they decide to engage with you later. I mean, you've had me send, I have to send a saliva sample coming in soon. I know I have that on my desk. So, I got to send a saliva sample in because, we're testing cortisol levels. But, you've had me send you shit in a box. So, I've had to do that too, right?
Yep.
A few times, right?
Yeah, that's true.
But it's again, we're optimizing every part of the body. And we started saying, I'm a results guy. Don't take my word for it. If you want to have some fun, go look at my photos from a few years ago and look at my photos now. Most people, when they look at their younger self, they envy their younger self. And they say, man, I wish I could go back and look more like my younger self. Like I look at my younger photos and I'm embarrassed by my younger photos.
Yeah, me too. It's crazy, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, yep.
I look younger now. In fact, you did a test on my DNA.
Yeah.
And I'm actually biologically younger now than I was back then.
No doubt.
Is that weird?
You're almost
like, that's weird. I don't know how that works, but that's just weird.
Yeah, you just reverse your biological age. I mean, chronological age, we can't do anything about that, but we can help slow down that aging process and even reverse it.
Yeah, that was crazy. And people see that. They will commonly tell me, oh, you look younger.
Yeah. Well, even the young dudes in the gym, you're like, hey, come on. I'm almost 50, dudes. You got to keep up.
That's been a joke, right? That's been a joke because I'll show up in the gym. I'm the old dude there. And many times we're, especially anything overhead, anything with shoulders, like I'm way above most people, right?
Wow.
Upper body, I'm really good on upper body. And, or, many times I'm finishing, if not first, like right in the front of the pack. And then I'm competing against people who are in their 20s, early 30s. And it's like, you're the old guy. Like, what's happening? Like,
yeah.
What? But that's good. That's good. So anyway, I know we kind of pushed the limit of our time here. Again, that's Ageless Future. If I was to say Regan, oh, by the way, then there's foundersfuel.co, right?
Yeah,
you want to know like where you get founders, right? Foundersfuel.co. We don't want to. So I don't know when this episode is going to go live. We've been inviting a small private beta group with people. By the time this goes live, it might actually be available for people to purchase, but that is going to be foundersfuel.co. And let's leave with one big tip. So for our listeners today, this is Beyond Seven Figures podcast. When it comes to being superhuman, what would you say is your biggest, best tip for our listeners, our executives, our CEOs, or founders who want to be superhuman themselves?
Oh man, the biggest tip is do something challenging every day that's also enjoyable.
And by challenging, we mean
go, on your hike, carry a 45-pound plate with you for a couple miles, and just see if it doesn't increase the challenge. But you'll find when you're done with that hike, if you just add a little more than what you're used to, you'll just feel better after doing that. And just do little experiments every day. It's a little experiment, challenge yourself in enjoyable avenues. And I think that's the secret to, if I had one tip, that it would be that.
And in 2 words, embracing discomfort, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's better said than what I said. Embrace the discomfort by forcing discomfort onto yourself.
Awesome. Awesome. I love that. All right. So that's foundersfuel.co, Regan Archibald from agelessfuture.com. And for more tips, strategies, and information for growing your business faster, more predictably, and less dependent on you, predictableprofits.com. So this is Charles Godet with my buddy Regan Archibald. I will see you in another episode.